YTPC, what's going on? Mark VV here, coming at you from the Briar Bothy, well, Porch Bothy, but it's like the same thing, right? On this beautiful Monday morning, it is a little chilly outside. As you can tell, I'm wearing a little bit of a jacket. For South Louisiana, this is unusual for late March. I mean, sometimes it gets cold, but you know, right now we're just like coming off of a very hot week. It's going to be cool for like a day, and then and this will be hot again tomorrow. So you know, like I say, hot, like 77 degrees is the high, so it's comfortable. The chickens are out this morning. It's always good. And I thought I'd just come on this morning to kind of reintroduce myself to the YTPC, not like a reintroduction, but kind of like, this is the channel, welcome to the channel, this is what it's about. I hope you enjoy, I hope you stick around. Drinking a little Scottish malt, single malt whiskey. I think it's still before 10 a.m. or maybe not, I don't know. Yeah, I'm doing a little day drinking, but not for, you know, to get drunk or anything like that. It's more to just to enjoy it. Whole point of this channel is to enjoy whiskey and tobacco, and that's what I'm doing. So yeah, hope everybody's doing well. The child is bouncing around inside. Anyway, about a year ago, I wrote down a little list of things that I consider very important to me, as far as for this channel specifically. I call them the Briar Bothy Commandments. It was more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing initially, but I thought I had written down a more comprehensive description for each one of these. There's only 4, technically 5, but there's 4 that are really important to me, that I thought I'd share on air, right? Oh, I should light my pipe. That would probably be important too. Little housekeeping. Another Strand pipe from Peterson Sherlock Holmes series. And in it, I have a tobacco I have very limited experience with, called Germain's Rich Dark Flake, which is a relatively rare tobacco in the U.S. I had to pull some strings to get this here, but it was worth it. But it's hard to find. You can't really commercially buy it in the U.S. As far as I know, it is a UK exclusive tobacco. People consider it to be the equivalent of Stonehaven, but there are some differences. People swear they're the same tobacco, but they're not. I think Stonehaven is more of a burley forward Virginia blend, and then Rich Dark Flake is a Virginia forward blend. It has some burley in it as well, but the constituent tobaccos are the same. They're just in different volumes. I think they're both topped with the same molasses, treacle, whatever you want to call it, mixture, topping, whatever. So they smell very similar, but I believe they are, from what I understand, different tobaccos. And in my glass, though I will go into it in more detail in future videos, is some Bunnahabhain 12-year-old single malt, which is probably, if it's not my favorite, it's one of my favorite whiskeys. I had to dry this for like an hour before I came out here. So it's been drying for a bit. Like a lot of Germain blends, it is fairly wet. Like a lot of European blends, it's fairly wet. I'd say Germain, but Samuel Gayworth and Hogarth, Germain, Esoterica, they're all fairly damp blends. They do, in my opinion, require a little bit of prep time. Hopefully you can't hear that music, it's kind of annoying. Let me see if I can close the door a little bit. Sorry for the dead air, this is very good. I'm really enjoying this. So, the Bothy commandments, shall we? I literally have it written down in a little book because I'm a bullet points kind of guy. Number 1, Scotch is not an acquired taste. This is probably my favorite one to talk about, only because it's absolutely 100% true. There's no tongue-in-cheek there. There's this misconception that Scotch whiskey is difficult to enjoy, and that you just have to keep trying it until you find an acquired taste, until you acquire a taste for it. And I find that to be kind of hogwash. Reason being is, unlike bourbon, where the cask has a heavy influence on the distillate spirit, where you get a lot of the oak flavor in there, unlike bourbon, Scotch doesn't pull a whole lot of flavor from the cask. It does pull some, depending on the length that's stored in the cask. But because it is a second fill situation where it's been first used by a bourbon distillery and then sold to a Scotch distillery, so they put their whiskey in the barrel second, after the bourbon has already pulled most of the flavor out of the wood. Scotch is then put in the barrel and they age it in that, right? So the distillate spirit has a lot more influence on the flavor of the whiskey. And every single Scotch whiskey is produced with different kinds of, not different kinds of malts, but they use malted barley, but malted barley is grown in different regions. It takes on different characteristics of the earth. Sometimes they smoke the barley and you have a smoky, peaty characteristic to your whiskey. So that really translates very heavily into the actual whiskey. So in my experience, every single Scottish whiskey tastes different to a degree. There are a lot of similarities depending on what region it comes from. But generally speaking, they all taste different. So if you find a Scotch that you don't like, just try another one. More than likely, you're going to find one that you enjoy. There you go. Scotch is not an acquired taste. You just got to find one you like. And if you don't find one you like, maybe you don't like Scotch. Just a thought. And in that case, you can acquire a taste for it by continually trying it until, I mean, it can be an acquired taste, but at its basic level, it's not. Number 2. Get back to my list here. Whiskey and tobacco do not mix. I forgot I wrote that one. This is actually a very important health-centered rule for the Briar Bothy. I will, on occasion, pair whiskey and tobacco, but I will encourage people not to do that for a very, very specific reason. When you drink alcohol, it breaks down the enzymes and protective lining in your mouth, thereby exposing the cellular makeup of your gums and your tongue and your throat to they're essentially unprotected, or at least have a lesser protection because of all the alcohol killing all of that, all the enzymes and stuff like that, the stuff that normally would protect your gums and teeth and mouth lining. So then you're introducing a carcinogen at the same time, which can be detrimental. It can impact your health. It can make you potentially get oral cancer, throat cancer. Probably not going to give you lung cancer because you have to inhale for that. Though just being in the presence of smoke, of course, is a risk factor in and of itself. But generally speaking, you don't want to make it a habit. That's what I'm saying. If you do it here and there, it's not going to, probably the risk factor is severely diminished. So pairing your whiskey and cigars and pipe tobacco all the time, probably not the best idea. Just a thought. I'm doing it right now only because this is the Briar Bothy. Number 3. Aromatic tobacco is real tobacco too. There's this. When it comes to hobbies, specifically subjective hobbies like whiskey and tobacco, you'll find a lot of elitism. This is true for pretty much any hobby, but there is a subset of people that take it extremely seriously. And when I say extremely seriously, you want to take your hobby seriously, but they take it so much so that their opinion is the only opinion that matters. So if you have a differing opinion, they're going to combat that with their subjective facts. There's 2 different kinds of facts here. We're subjective and objective. Subjective being opinions, and objective being the actual truth. And there are some objective qualities to whiskey and some objective qualities to tobacco, but generally speaking, your interpretation of the flavors and the tastes and the experience is very much a subjective thing. It's very much a personalized, opinion-based experience. Aromatic tobacco. And this goes into the next number 4, and I'll cover that in a little more detail in just a minute, but aromatic tobacco is tobacco too. People that enjoy it, I don't think it's fair to look down upon anybody. If you enjoy tobacco, you enjoy tobacco. It doesn't matter whether it's cased, uncased, flavored, unflavored. It doesn't matter. The best tobacco is the tobacco you enjoy, the way you like to enjoy it. That's all there is to it. Can't look down on people for it. Can't shame them for it. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. Especially when it comes to an opinion-based hobby. Your opinion is yours. Everybody's got one. Doesn't mean it's right. So when you are in the Bothy, do not shame people for enjoying aromatic tobacco or non-aromatic tobacco or vice versa or whatever. Number 4. Flavored whiskey is good, but it doesn't count as whiskey. It's probably going to ruffle some feathers. And this is where I was kind of going with that last one. When you have... It depends on what the end goal of the flavoring is. When it comes to tobacco, the end goal of the flavoring is usually, not always, but usually to accentuate the natural tobacco. Cornell and Deal does this fantastically. Peterson does this fantastic. There's a lot of different manufacturers that do it just wonderfully. They put a flavoring in there. You get a little bit of the flavoring, but the predominant focus is still the tobacco. Captain Black Grape does not count. That is not tobacco. I will shame you if you smoke Captain Black Grape, or if you like to grape your tobaccos. I'm looking at you. Do not do that. Aside from that very specific tobacco, they're all good. I think the manufacturers do a good job of really highlighting the natural tobacco flavors that they are trying to complement. When it comes to whiskey, the goal of flavoring is to hide the aggressive and undesirable flavors of the whiskey. So when you have a peach flavored whiskey, it's going to taste like peach. You're not going to taste the whiskey because they want you to enjoy the flavor, right? And this, again, it can also, generally speaking, that's the goal. There are some decently flavored whiskeys, but I still can't rightfully call them a whiskey because you're not getting, the focus isn't on the whiskey, it's on the flavor. And vice versa, the tobacco side, you can have some tobaccos like Captain Black Grape, like some of the more like Middleton Cherry, where the flavoring is the focus. Are they tobaccos? I mean, sure. Is a flavored whiskey? Sure. Do I consider it whiskey? No, still don't. Not fair. Rule number 5, not in this book, but there's a whiskey community that I am a part of called the Whiskey Tribe, and they are on YouTube and YouTube and Facebook. I'm trying to think if they're anywhere else. They have a Patreon presence. That's where they crowdfund their. It's essentially a crowdfunded distillery called Crowded Barrel out of Austin, Texas, and their community side is called the Whiskey Tribe. So they part of their fundraising is they use Patreon subscriptions, which I've done with them before, but I'm not currently a subscriber. Just for financial reasons, being a stay-at-home dad, I can only afford so many frivolous things. But one of the main rules of the Whiskey Tribe is a rule that I've really taken to and said this is a really important rule. I should incorporate that into my my Briar Bothy Bible, Briar Bothy Commandments. Which is simply what I said before, but in reference to tobacco. The best whiskey is the whiskey you like to enjoy the way you like to enjoy it. And that's it. It is giving creed to the opinion-based matter of a subjective hobby. That whatever you like is what you like, and nobody can tell you any differently. They can have opinions, but you're not wrong for liking something that you like. You're not. You can't be. So if you like to throw ice in your whiskey, if you like to throw a bunch of water in your whiskey, that's up to you. That is 100% up to you. However, that being said, through this channel and through my experience, I will encourage people to get to the point where you don't need to, because you will enjoy the experience that much more. Because a lot of times these distilleries put forth a whiskey they don't want you to water down. Now, there are instances where you'll have a Scotch whiskey that needs a little help. Sometimes you'll drink it and you'll think, wow, that tastes really good, but it feels like there's something trying to come through. So a little bit of water sometimes opens it up just enough to where it blossoms into this beautiful, beautiful whiskey. And that's what the distillery intended. Usually if it's a high proof whiskey, they kind of want you to proof it down a little bit. But if it's a 40% ABV alcohol by volume whiskey, probably you don't want to water it down too much more than that. You'll probably lose a lot of the flavor. So I typically don't water down my whiskey, or if I do, it's a little drop, a milliliter at most. So yeah, that is the Briar Bothy Commandments. Follow them, or I'll exile you from the community entirely, and you will not be welcome back ever. Just kidding. It's mostly tongue-in-cheek, for amusement. But there is some seriousness to it. That's why I explain each one to you. And yeah, that's it. I'm gonna continue to enjoy the Stonehaven. Stonehaven Rich Dark Flake. It tastes just like it. It has a very, very, very similar quality to it. Very enjoyable. Gonna finish my little dram of whiskey. And I will see you soon. Thanks for stopping by.